Hey everybody, welcome in. It's Friday. A lot of questions in my mind and in yours. The biggest one is, do the ETFs matter? Do they have an impact on price? Can Bitcoin go up without the ETFs? We'll answer that. We'll also do a detailed analysis of what happens historically to Bitcoin post-halving, especially the first 30 days. I'll break all that down too, as well as a ton of news, ton of charts, ton of observations that you will find nowhere else. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the mods in the chat as well. Hope you guys all have a great weekend. So let's go. Very first piece out of the way though, Team Patreon. So glad to be in Patreon. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Hobbit. Thank you for being part of the crew. So Bitcoin Only playlist will be here after it's edited, and let's start with the charts today because there is a lot of charts. It's kind of turning into an octa thing, good, the bad, and the ugly. Now we start with what there is the most of. So first of all, we had the fourth worst day in ETFs ever. GrayScale, obviously, as usual, takes a big dump. Fidelity went down, ARK went down, Bitwise went down, Valkyrie went down. It was ugly. But there's good news, and I'll get to that. And despite the fourth worst day ever, Bitcoin is exactly where it was last Friday that I did this. Has not changed at all. We'll break all that down. Now, as usual, the dumpage continues, but I don't think it matters anymore. GrayScale dumping another, what is that? Let me see, 14 or 2,000 Bitcoin. That's ballpark $120 million, maybe $130 million being dumped again today. Like clockwork. Jeff Hammer, thank you for coming. This is pretty insane, everybody. Non-stop bleed. So much for Michael Sonnenschein saying we're reaching equilibrium. No, they're not. They're literally going to escape velocity to zero at a stunning rate. But the good news is, the reason I'm not bothered is I'll prove it doesn't really matter anymore. So first of all, the big question that I see on everybody's lips, the question du jour: what is the ETF influence on Bitcoin? So yes, it does have an impact. The ETFs have amassed a huge bag of Bitcoin, 300 to 400,000 Bitcoin in a very short window of time. A lot of buying activity. It did drive us from $40,000 to $75,000. And yes, we're going through a stagnation period. That is pretty clear. And what else? Let me see. Retail is arriving, and I am doing that detailed cohort analysis to show you exactly who's stacking and who's not, and what the evolution has been over the last 5 years. It's taken some time to do. I was hoping to have it done today, but maybe I'll sneak it out later tonight or over the weekend, so stay tuned for that one as well. It'll be on the Bitcoin playlist. And what else? Retail is arriving. It's counteracting the actual slowdown in ETFs, and Hong Kong is coming. And there are other buyers behind the scenes as well. Oh, let me check. I forgot to check today if a certain person that will remain nameless has bought. No, but they are kicking the tires. 3 test buys already, so they're getting ready to buy back again, and you know who that is too. So let's talk about the first question that I had on my mind. What does Bitcoin do after the halving? And here is a simple little chart. So we are now 6 days after the halving, and Bitcoin is down 2%. By the way, technically we're in the 5th epoch, but the first one doesn't really count, so it's not statistically relevant data. So I just call this epoch number 4, when technically it's epoch number 5, but I just ignore the first one. You could call the first one epoch 0. Anyway, we are down 2% after the first 6 days. What's interesting is when I compare that to the other cycles, it was up 8, up 2, up 13 after 6 days. But then after 30 days, this is more interesting. Epoch 1 up 9%, Epoch 2 down 9%, Epoch 3 up 16%. And then the big juice comes 3 months after the halving. Epoch 1, 253%. Epoch 2, what a stinker of a year. It was like 3 months, 90 days. Down 5%. And then Epoch 3 up 136%. And remember also, a lot of macro things can happen during these time frames that do have a bearing on Bitcoin as well. However, the macroeconomic environment is very fragile right now, which means the world is in need of risk-off assets. By the way, gold had its worst daily dip ever in about 2 years just yesterday. Now, 6 months after halving, Epoch 1 up 1,025%, Epoch 2 153%, and Epoch 3 173%. The question is, what will happen this time? And I think it'll be good. I put together a visual of what this looks like. Basically, the takeaway here is not much happens the first 30 days after halving. If we do go bonkers, that will be special. We do still have about 4 days to go to break even on the month of April. Otherwise, it'll be a down month as well. Now, the average of these numbers, which is most important, is 6 days after. Typical gains 5% based on history. 30 days after, exactly the same, 5% up. So don't expect a rocket ship to happen. But if there are big dips, again, if I see Bitcoin around 60K, I will be tempted to buy more, as I did a couple of weeks or so ago. And 3 months after halving, 128% average return. And 6 months after halving, 450%, ladies and gentlemen. Viciously and Joe the Hun, thank you for coming. We have our first Hun in the audience. Love it. So either way, we go up after halving, but there is a delay. There is some indigestion. There's a lot of anxiety as well around halvings. What happens? Will the protocol take it? Will it break? We'll see. Now, let's look at some of the ETF status since we began 73 trading days ago. Net flow into these ETFs, $12.4 billion. Now remember, 20.5 billion of that flew out of GrayScale. So you got to look at the total. How much has gone into these new ETFs? It's $32.9 billion because GrayScale bled over $20 billion. Now, the past week flow is $0.08 billion. That's 80 million bucks. Not a lot. The total amount held by these ETFs, 836,000 Bitcoin. And the on-chain holdings is $53.3 billion. So these things are a force to be reckoned with. If you assume there'll never be more than 14 or 15 million Bitcoin, that's a big bag. That's a big stack. Now, another thing that I was asking myself is, what has happened since the ETFs have stalled? So what I did was I overlaid all the trading days to all the money flow, cumulative money flow, and compared that to price. And we get a very interesting result here as well. I am Colt. Thank you for coming. And happy Friday, everybody. It's the weekend. I love the weekends because I get to work all weekend too, which is awesome. But here, what I did was I compared the Bitcoin price in blue to the cumulative money flow into these puppies. And basically, since it's stalled, the Bitcoin price has actually held up pretty well. It has come down a little bit, but it depends from where you measure. The cumulative flow has also gone up, so has the Bitcoin price. But right now, we are in that stagnant period. So I put together another chart that shows you the net money flow and the Bitcoin price. And this is a lot more telling. It shows you how much has been pulled out of the system. And you can see ever since approximately day 45, it has not been good. It's been completely flat. And the Bitcoin price itself also has been up ever so slightly. So the good news is, despite the crazy dumpage by the ETFs, Bitcoin's holding up pretty darn well. And in fact, it's over 64,000 as I speak right now. So let's look at some charts, more charts before we get into more charts. Bitcoin on the ATR model is at 64,000. When we look at this, this helps us zoom out and understand exactly where we are. The trend is still solid. We have a buy signal and we're between level 6 and level 7. So we're basically at the top of the range for this asset, despite the weakness. And we could expect this weakness to continue for another 2 to 3 weeks. Unless, of course, Hong Kong goes gangbusters. And you combine that with maybe GrayScale finding equilibrium. Who knows? And I did cover one of my tinfoil hat theories yesterday that maybe, because when you look at the mapping between buying and selling between BlackRock and GrayScale, they are identical. Absolutely identical. Which makes me very suspicious. The other thing that makes me very suspicious is how can there be $1 billion of volume 2 days in a row for BlackRock and they don't buy or sell one Bitcoin? Very suspicious. Maybe they're just stacking money away, waiting for the price to come down. Then they'll buy it and pretend they sold it at a higher price. I don't know. It makes me very suspicious. All these little things, all the little breadcrumbs, it's just something seems off. Anyway, I could be wrong. Now, despite these ETFs, this is literally a 1 week chart of where we are from exactly where I was 7 days ago, standing here talking to you all at the exact same time. The price is still $64,000. And it was a huge sell-off over the last week. We'll break that down in a minute too. But despite all that, and despite the BlackRock Bitcoin stuff, it still is not done breaking records. And this is what's interesting. Yes, they had 2 flat days of zero, which I find hard to believe. But anyway, that's just me. Only the paranoid survive, ladies and gentlemen. But this is from Eric Balchunas. And while EBIT's daily inflow streak is over, that's a positive inflow streak at 71 days. It's not done setting records, because if you look at this, you can see this look at ETF assets all time after the first 72 days in the market, and nothing comes close to IBIT and Fidelity. Okay, they are in their league of their own, and it shows how overheated it all was, and a breather is overdue as well, some people believe. Again, as I always say, nothing in markets goes straight up. Nobody hikes the Himalayas straight up in a row. They take a breather, base camps and all that type of stuff. That's exactly what we're seeing here, probably. Now, the good news is as well, because they haven't done a negative day, you could argue zero and positive is still something, and that'll be another record that they will break as well. So let's look at another thing too. A lot of people were scared day one after the halving. This thing called runes blowing fees to the moon, which got the miners very excited. But for James Van Straten, who is on vacation as we speak, Bitcoin fees are back to pre-halving levels. Rune is now almost dead, just pulling in 20% of the fees after 8 days. All right, so you know, these fads and trends, they come and go, but the speed at which they come and the speed at which they go is also staggering. So for those of you who are banking on runes to make you financially free, they'll probably just ruin you, excuse the pun. That's just the world of memes. That's why we don't touch them here. Let's look at some charts as well before we get to the news at the very back. Mixing it up. People like when they don't know what they're going to get. It's like a surprise. So first chart, day 73, raw numbers. Big, nasty red sign. Equivalent to day 60 in terms of the outflow. I did mention at the beginning we had the 4th worst day ever. And not a lot of action. And Fridays, historically, are crummy days for the ETF, so I don't expect a lot more either. In fact, GrayScale is going to do another little dump, but we'll see. We'll see if Hong Kong is actually preceding their funds. Maybe that's the reason the price is staying so stable. After the huge dump yesterday, I expected Bitcoin to hit 62, 61K yesterday. It didn't. Watching it all night, it didn't. It held steady. And this shows you somebody's out there bidding this thing up, or nobody is selling. So super interesting. This is the macro update. You can see the green down, not as hard as in the past, but still down nasty, and no action on the top of the chart. Again, the ETFs are worried about the macro. They're worried Bitcoin's gone too far too fast. They're waiting for certain things to shake out from the halving. We'll see. Many different reasons as to why it's not going to the moon. Now, we did have that 4th worst money day ever, down $217.6 million. Today, I reckon we could be down another 100 million. But again, the hits keep coming. The ETFs are dumping, and the price is staying constant. And I can't stress that enough. That's actually a really good sign. And I know a lot of retail were late to the party. Maybe now they're saying, oh, well, I know it's going back to 73,000, so I'm going to grab some at 64. Who knows? I'll know tomorrow after we finish the cohort analysis. Total money flow, the big down blue box here, 4th worst day ever, and 33 billion into the ETFs. It was 34 yesterday. It varies, 539,000 Bitcoin in the 9 new ETFs, which is big, and 3,374 Bitcoin were added to the system yesterday because of the dumpage. That is substantial. That is 7 or 8 times the amount of daily issuance today. So again, it's natural. Markets go up and markets go down. But there's more. So there's some stuff happening out there in the marketplace. This is from Alex Gladstein. This is a disaster. Phoenix advertised itself as a Bitcoin wallet from the future, and it's true. And the US government is chasing technological innovation out of the United States. It's a sad, sad day to be an American. And the Phoenix wallet was removed from the US app stores out there. So we know that these, non-custodial Lightning wallets shutting down after the US recent announcements from authorities. But many argue as well that software is free speech. And the right to own Bitcoin is also a freedom that everybody should have. But you can see there are plans that maybe, hypothetically, some people don't want people to self-custody their own Bitcoin because it's non-KYC and it cannot be tracked. Perhaps that's it. Anyway, a lot of twists and turns there. Also, some sad news for our friends in Japan. This is Bitcoin. It is breaking new all-time highs, but against the yen. And over the last 9 years, up 25,000%. Another view, that chart is Bitcoin over yen. This chart is yen over Bitcoin. It's lost 99.6% over the last 9 years. Stunning to think. And remember, this is where all fiat is going. Maybe this is why the governments don't want anybody having anything else other than fiat, because it's better for them if they can print it infinitely and everything else. So we'll see. Scary times. And in terms of the amount of Satoshis per dollar, always interesting to track, because there will come a day, everybody, where we'll be paying people in Satoshis. How much is that apple? Oh, that apple is 2,500 Satoshis. Or more, depending on the store you go to. And it sounds expensive, but over time, as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the number of Satoshis required to buy something will go down. And that's what you're seeing here in this beautiful chart from Charts BTC. And you can see where it's come from. There was a time when $1 was worth 100 million sats. And that wasn't too long ago. Now it's only 1,558. And in time, it will go to 100. And then it'll go to 10. And then one day, actually an interesting question just popped into my mind. Who wants a little math quiz? What is the price of Bitcoin if the dollar remains the same, but the parity is hit, i.e. one side equals $1? Interesting math calculation. I'll show you the answer tomorrow. And brother, breaking news too. This is the network fees on Bitcoin versus Ethereum. And you can see the sum of total fees spent to use a particular blockchain. And this tracks the willingness to use a chain, kind of like the demand, kind of like at a gas station, the demand for gasoline. And Bitcoin fees reached a daily all-time high of over $80 million on the back of the record-breaking launch of Runes, which is, of course, dissipating very fast, as I covered before. But what is interesting is fees are up. Price is up. Exchange flows are $1.1 billion. When we compare that to Ethereum, it's clear that, price is up too for ETH, but fees are down hard, which means people aren't using the chain as much. And exchange flows are down $200 million. So it's interesting to compare and contrast the two big heavyweights in crypto and how they are today. So that is the quick update. I hope you liked it. We cannot expect rocket ships for the next, call it 24 days. Unless, of course, two things happen. One, GrayScale stops selling or drastically slows down. And two, Hong Kong buy a lot. So we'll watch this very carefully. And number three, it's very positive to see the fact that the ETFs are dumping a ton of Bitcoin and the price is holding steady. So that's the good news for today, mixed with some bad news as well. Hope you enjoyed the show. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you, Ken, for coming. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Two things tomorrow. I'll do the Bitcoin Daily and the recapping the week, all the big news you missed. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.